everybody, and welcome to our last summer virtual series session. This is an exciting one. We are joined tonight by our president, Mr. John Delaney. You want to go ahead and say hello real quick?
Hello, glad you're logging in. Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. So we've had quite the summer of a lot of these different sessions. These are a chance for our families and students to connect with the institution, ask any questions, meet with a couple different offices, go over some different resources. But I thought it would be a really fun way to end this series by getting to know you a little bit more in your experience here at Flagler, your experience raising four children going through college, and kind of all the different things that you've seen. A couple housekeeping items for our viewers is we are recording all of these. They're all up on our Flagler College YouTube channel. We've got a playlist where all of these recordings are at. And then don't forget that we have the Q&A option open. So if we've got some time and you've got some other questions, pop them into there. We'll be sure to ask them. And if we can't find the answer, then hopefully we'll be able to connect you to an office that will know that. But let's go ahead and just dive into these questions. This will be your fourth academic year. This is like your senior year here at Flagler.
I'm not planning on graduating this year, though, but yes.
Well, you can't graduate yet. No, we're going to make you like a super senior for a little bit. But what makes Flagler unique? What, from your perspective?
Well, there's a lot of elements to that. You know, people go to college to get an education, to get a degree, and this is my 19th year in higher ed, and fundamentally, the small classes are the best. The faculty members know your name. They can kind of read your body language to see if this topic is making sense that they're teaching. It's a lot more of an intimate experience. And, you know, if you go to a big university, a lot of times the classes aren't even taught by professors. They're taught by graduate students that to try to work through to get their doctorate. They're agreeing to teach some classes, and some obviously are going to be good. But in my experience, the last thing they want to do is teach a class. They're trying to get that PhD so they can get on with their own career. So that's the unique element of it, is just this educational experience. When I first came, the quality of the faculty is just stunning, and how much they like to teach and be engaged with students. The other, Tara, I know we'll talk about it, is just the setting. I mean, it is a one of a kind of a thing, and you know, it's been described as one of the top 10 prettiest campuses in the entire world by Architectural Digest, one of the prettiest dining halls in the world, one of the most unique campuses in the world. So that setting is really unique. The Urban Land Institute, which is about developing cities and communities, has a phrase they call, quote, a sense of place. And that you kind of know it when you see it. It can be a cathedral, it can be the Grand Canyon, it can be the Redwoods. For me, I live close to the ocean, so I walk down the beach, and every day it looks different, and I just view it as one of the seventh wonders of the world. Well, the Flagler campus has a sense of place, and obviously you can just look at some pictures of it. We get students that come just off the photographs of the place. So that combination is a pretty darn good combination.
But that's so important, because I remember even for myself, like when you walked onto the college campus, you knew you were home. And I think that's what we hear from a lot of our students, is that when they walk on it, they just know they belong here and that they're going to find.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, visited some alums. They'd probably been graduated 20, 25 years. The wife was from Miami and the husband was from Sweden. And I always love asking students, how did you find us? What was it?
I do it all the time, yes.
Yeah, well, and each of them had never visited the campus. They went to the guidance counselor's office, and the student from Sweden saw a brochure with a picture of the Ponce. He says, I want to go there. Same thing with his soon-to-be wife. They met their freshman year, and it was just hooked because of just that Ponce presence. The Ponce, of course, is the main building, the kind of castle-looking place, Disney-looking kind of a place.
Yeah, I love hearing about all the students who said, I came here on my fourth grade field trip, and I just knew that that's where I was going to go. And
came to St. Augustine on a vacation, visited my aunt driving through the town. Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of stunning the numbers that get hooked on that.
Well,
that's why I always want to.
It's about 53% that are from out of state of our students. So the bulk of them are coming from outside of Florida.
Right. And we want to make it feel like home for the students that come from out of that. Yeah, it's around half from out of state, a lot from up in the Northeast and in the Midwest, a block from Georgia, and then the rest from various places throughout the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Um, Positive place.
Yeah. So you've obviously talked about Ponce Hall, but what is your favorite place on campus?
I saw you said over you were going to ask that question, and I I don't know if I can really name one. As you mentioned, I'm now starting my fourth year. Every day I find something new, a carving on a wall, the way the tile work works, something new in each of the rooms. I mean, looking at the outside from almost any angle is really enchanting. The rotunda, when you walk into it, the big open space. Frankly, if you walk up and look at sort of the upper floors that look down into the rotunda, each view there is different. We've now opened up what's known as the bird cage, which is the space actually above the rotunda. In the renovation and restoration of the building, there was some rooms that kind of blocked outside light from getting there. It's just a great study space. So I get a kick out of the kayak lodge, which is actually not in the Ponce. It's on the western edge of campus on the river. So there's a lot of unique things, and I guess I like to sit in the mezzanine area, which is the area just above the first floor or the bottom floor. And we got some big cushy chairs in there and a couple of old fireplaces that you could just imagine that back in the day when they had some fires roaring in those.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know just being here for 15 years and getting to see all the different kinds of spaces, I feel like I sometimes still will turn a corner and be like, well, look at this surprise nook and cranny that's over here. Or, I'm a big fan of the Flagler room. I could sit there and, I adore going to meetings in there, but sometimes I don't always pay attention because I like to look up at the Tiffany blue ceiling and see all the inscriptions and the colors and things like that. But there's
Oh, it's
definitely
a gorgeous
plenty.
room. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the dining hall just
Mhm.
stuns me every single time I walk in it. And one of the board members' daughter had a wedding in there, and they had dressed it up differently than it normally was. And it kind of highlighted other areas that you didn't really notice. And that has the gorgeous murals on the ceiling, much like the Flagler room does. The alumni house is a neat space.
Mhm.
And the Markland House, which was built in the earlier 1800s with the big columns and everything out front. That's next on our list to go back and do a restoration on it. But I don't know how many people have tuned in, realized about the restoration that we're doing of the Ponce. It
Mhm.
was built in the
Mhm.
1880s as a hotel by Henry Flagler. Henry Flagler and Rockefeller um, kind of invented the oil industry in the 1800s and became the billionaires of the day. The two of them had about 2% of the country's wealth each. So 1/25th of the country's wealth was owned by the two of them. Just mind-boggling money. And so Flagler began building these luxury hotels down through Florida. He really kind of fell in love with Florida and its future. And so the buildings they designed are spectacular. But it's been adjusted down through the years. During World War II, the Coast Guard took it over, and so we decided we needed to do a gut. And the Coast Guard had done a lot of damage on the inside. But what triggered this thought is you talking about kind of finding these new spaces. We found old fireplaces that have been covered up, and spaces that had been made into a utility room down through time that had a fireplace in it. Some spaces that had these ornate curved windows that actually had been used for storage and kind of closed off. So um, you got 4 years. I'm still discovering new spaces on the campus.
Yeah. Well, and with some of this construction, I know today in one of our meetings, they brought in some shadow display boxes of the items that they've been finding throughout history, a wallet from a Coast Guard member, different just items and things that are from across the years. But when you're talking about the restoration, I'm going to jump a little bit around on our agenda here. That really makes me think about our 5-star plan and how that's something that we're really doing to enhance the spaces to make the student experience the best that we can here at Flagler. So can you share a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, we decided then there was a triggering event, but that we really wanted to go in and do a massive restoration of the Ponce back to kind of a lot of the original sort of a feel and colors and those kinds of things. And we decided also to make a major investment across the campus. So the facilities were really, really big. We're working on the Ponce. We're doing a lot of other work in other spaces on campus too. and we've got kind of a landscaping concept that we really want to kind of get that even prettied up and established a little bit more. But the buildings are one, the technology is another. Wi-Fi now and being able to do things on your computer, your iPad, your iPhone.
Connect your 17 different pieces of technology that you need to operate in one day.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I had one board member who joked that Wi-Fi to students is more important than food, and may not be quite, but it's up there.
But I mean, they're going to use the Wi-Fi to order food if they want to get something delivered.
Yeah. So we're doing a complete upgrade in that, spending millions of dollars on our IT system and all the connectivity across campus. That's already been kind of wonders. And then overall enhancements, we mentioned the kayak launch. That was one of the things we learned from students. They'd like to be able to access that river, which is on the western end of campus. And your shop, you ought to talk about some of the creative things your people are doing out there. I think of a kayak launch as a place to put a kayak in the river, but back to you on what you've done.
We've just bought remote control boats that I am very excited about. And so yes, it's called the kayak launch, but there are so many other things to do at the dock. They're teaching students how to fish. There was one afternoon I walked out there and there were students on all the different levels fishing, some who had never fished before and others who are avid fishers. I think the team is looking at some telescopes to put out there. They've had yoga out there. I mean, it's just another space. This is the students' home. And so we want them to feel like they've got different things to be engaged with instead of just the four walls of their room.
Movie night out there.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, astronomy night, like you said, with the telescopes to look and kind of talk about the constellations. It's parties out there. I never would have thought of how creative the student affairs shop has been, and students will come up with ideas for us on what to use it for too. So it's a neat amenity that has been added, and we're going to start a biology degree that's long been on our agenda. But because we decided to do the restoration of the ponds, building a new science building, we've had to move out a little bit. And our faculty came up with the idea of really a modular building with the labs in it. So that's going into place this fall. It can be done a lot more quickly and help us be able to launch that biology degree, which is a kind of a high demand area that students are interested in. We did a coastal environmental degree that has proven to be very, very popular. And so biology will also help those students that are interested in pre-med. We've got enough courses you can get pre-med. We've sent people to med school or students to med school, but those are kind of things that are really helpful. Renovated the archaeology lab. When you're in a city like St. Augustine, the oldest city in the country that has had buildings here since the 1500s, there's always stuff that they find when they want to dig. And Fort Mose, which was one of the early free African American settlements in old Spain, when Spain owned the state of Florida. So a lot of things to really kind of go into the innovation center. Brad, Mandy Brown are alums. They live up in Charlotte, but they funded that, and so that enhancement kind of a thing. And then student life was another one. That was one of the first things that I said, look, we've got to put more money into this. Sometimes when I think back on college, it's the memories and the friends and the experiences that mean as much as what I picked up in the classroom and kind of, prep me for the rest. Concerts have been proven to be very, very popular. St. Augustine has a big amphitheater that can seat a couple thousand people. It's a great place to watch a concert at night. Things cool down in Florida, a little breeze kicks up, and it's a great place to go. I think we had some of the biggest attendance for Flagler events ever at these concerts. And so they've proven to be really, really popular. There's sort of a big sing out loud music series downtown that Flagler's a part of that we get tickets for students. And again,
that's the new thing now is we were doing these exclusive Flagler concerts at the AMP for our students, but now we're partnering with them to bring the students to the community for that sing out loud. Noah Kahn, I don't know if you're a fan. I've heard of him, but that's the big name that I know. At a past orientation, one of our family members was like, all right, my student is already set. How does he get his ticket?
Yeah. Well, and those are the kind of things we like to get feedback from the students on what they'd like. So, my musical era is past some of them, but that's what you really want to try to respond to, are the things that the students are interested in. We did a repair to the pool 3 years ago, I guess, a
Mhm,
little over 3 years
mhm.
ago, and you've done movie nights out there. I think the first movie was Jaws,
It
and
was, yes, I
yeah,
was
and the
so
students,
surprised by how many students floated around the pool to Jaws for
yeah,
2 hours.
yeah. But those are the kind of things. There's events in the lawn all the time, bounce houses and those kinds of things. So that's an important investment. And you try to scratch all students' itches. Those that want to surf. Well, there's a group that go to surf and different kinds of clubs and gaming and tech things. And so there's a lot of opportunities. But we're putting a lot of money into it and resources to really try to do this new phase of Flagler College on all of those fronts we just mentioned as part of the 5-star plan.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and shift a little bit now to you as a parent of college students, but also maybe a little bit of mentorship that you've offered. And so talk to us a little bit about what that was like putting your own children through college, and what pearls of wisdom can you share with our incoming families?
Yeah, when my oldest went off, I was talking to a friend who his oldest had just gone off to college, and I still remember his line to me. He said, they need to prepare you for how emotional it is on a parent to head to college. And it really was kind of right. It was jolting with the first one. And I literally cried all the way home, just thinking everything is going to change and this sort of a deal. And same with the second one. Oldest was a boy. The second oldest one was a daughter. By the third and fourth, it got a little bit easier. I
You're like, see you
realized
later.
that,
We're good. We've been through
yeah,
this.
yeah, you realize they're still your kids. They still are going to be in touch. And what's so changed the world is that cell phone, the FaceTiming, the texting, the emails. It's so easy to be in touch anymore. So they just don't feel like they're as far away as it can, I think, originally seem. But that is a warning to parents. It's a bit of a jolt. I had a friend that introduced me to his pastor about the time we had dropped my firstborn off. And he said, Pastor, John's having trouble. He just dropped his kid off. It's been emotional for him. And the pastor goes, oh, you're going to get used to that. And I go, really? And he says, yeah. He says, you leave a quart of milk in the refrigerator. It's there when you come home at night. The living room is clean. It's clean when you come home at night. And he was true. It's the next stage. It's tough taking a kid to kindergarten. It's tough when
Mhm.
they move to junior high or off to high school. And so when they move out, you do feel that. But I used to tell this story that when my youngest was 3, we walked down to the beach and standing in the ocean with the waves coming in, and your feet kind of sink, and he goes, let go, let go, let go, and he's sitting there enjoying it, and then he goes, take my hand, take my hand. I grab his hand, and we go out a few more steps, and it was in the afternoon, and I could see his shadow going out into the in the ocean, mine and his, and I realized I wanted him to stay that way forever, but he can't. This is you need them to grow up. That's what parenting is about. Giving them love helps a bunch. I mean, that really solves a lot of ills. There's no great textbook on how to be a parent, but the college thing is what helps prepare them for that next stage of life. So, to those parents out there, if it's your first, it gets easier. I'll just say that.
Yeah, no, I remember when we were in the heat of COVID, and it was like you were terrified of sending your kid to school. And I remember the teacher just saying to me, like, it's my job to be with them and to take care of them. And that's what I used to tell parents then, is that it's now our job here at Flagler to take care of your children. Is I'm putting the trust in the school to take care of my own kid. We want you to put that trust into us, that we're here to care for them.
Yeah, and as you know, I always say when I meet with parents groups and families at orientation and new students, um, I've yet to see a new problem that a student has,
We're gonna
and
knock on wood right now. We're knocking on
yeah,
wood.
we've got somewhere on campus to help, whether it's a physical disability, a mental health issue, a stress, a loss of a relative, that grandparent that happens to pass away, tight on money. We've got people. We're there. We've seen it all at this point in time, and so we've got somebody there to try to help and help people get through it. That's part of our job, as you say, as you reference the teacher with your daughter.
Yeah. And so we've been telling a lot of our family members, at least through our orientation sessions, now is the time to talk with your student about like different expectations, what those relationships look like. We talk a lot about, communication and check-ins and stuff like that. What's something that maybe you worked through with some of your kids before they arrived to college? Like what expectations
I
looked
kind of
like?
had to think back on that and hit a rewind button. And really, I kind of had two things: call your mom, and the second was to go to class. Some mornings it just feels so hard to get out of bed, but even if you're halfway sleeping in class, you'll pick something up. And the discipline of making sure you go to class is really, really, really important. And you get high school structured. You're there from 8 to 3 or 8:30 to 4 o'clock, whatever that schedule
Mhm,
happens to
mhm.
be. And every hour is filled with something. Maybe there's a blank hour for study hall and lunch. But in college, you got a lot more of that open time. So really the third thing I said, now that I'm thinking back on it, was to make sure you use those blocks of time to study, that treat this as a 40, 50, 55, 60-hour a week job.
Mhm.
When you're not in class, you've always got assignments to work on. You can always go over your notes. You can always, skim back through a book that you've already read, but you're there to get a degree. And so that's really what to kind of focus on. But
I
calling your
always
mom
like
is always
the
good.
Yeah, I always like the rule, 3 hours of study prep time per credit that you're enrolled in. Average student is enrolled in 15 credits, so you're looking at about 45 hours throughout the week that you're
Plus the class
devoting.
itself. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whether that's visiting our learning resource center, whether that's, connecting with a professor during their office hours, whether it's studying, group or on your own, library time, things like that. But I really liked that rule of thumb.
Yeah, and then
Um,
keep the context of that. You got well over 100 hours in a week, and so you've got a lot of time to be able to get those 45 done.
Yes, yes. I do always tell people, make sure that you put in your eating time. That is important. Make sure you put in a little bit of time for you, whether that's reading, whether that's going to the beach, whether that's, hanging out with friends, heading to a coffee shop or something like that. I see that we do have one quick question. Just as a reminder, we will be recording this and we will put it out to our students in their weekly newsletters once it becomes available for us. But all of these are posted to the Flagler College YouTube channel. So thank you for that question, because it was also a reminder that if anybody does have any questions as we're going through our list, to make sure you pop them in there and we'll ask them. Um, what's an example of when you really wanted to step in to handle something for your student and you were like, I need to let them take this on themselves?
Um, I with our youngest daughter, really a roommate issue, and some of those, and actually she roomed with her best friend who was her first cousin, so they'd known each other
Oh, so
since they
it's
were
family
babies. But
too.
and they're still close. But living in sharing a space like that, it takes a little bit of adjusting. And to parents, that's part of growing up too. When you get to work, you're going to have issues with workmates and this kind of a thing. So trying to navigate that, and then that case, I kind of said, "Hey, you got to work it out." And there's a resident advisor on each floor that they can
Mhm.
talk and see. At a certain point, if we got to switch roommates, we can make that happen. We've got a process for that. But I think the other thing, I had a student who was a little older at one point complain he wanted to work full time during the day and go to class full time at night and graduate in 4 years. And I remember the head of the department that he was in copied me on an email to him. And he said, look, college requires a sacrifice. You've got to
Mhm.
invest some money, you're investing some time. You earn a degree, you're not given a degree. And so there's a few times you kind of go, like to that particular student, this is for you to work out. And it's really hard, it's impossible, frankly, to try to work 40 or 50 hours a week and
Mhm.
then just go at night and graduate. And we don't have a whole lot of night classes
No,
at
yeah.
Flagler anyway at our place. This was at another institution. So it's a second, it takes work. It takes work, and it's not meant to be easy. In fact, if it's too easy, it's not worth it. You're not
Yeah.
getting your money's worth out of it, and it's not going to help you in the future.
Yeah. What was one of your favorite things to send as a care package to one of your kids?
Well, that was my wife. So she always took care of that. She always had an instinct for what they needed. And I
What
know
they
when I
needed?
went, yeah, right,
My
right.
mother always sent me Oreos, and so I knew she knew I needed them.
Yeah, back when I was a student, it was food that you liked. It was the cookies, it was homemade brownies and these kinds of things. And gift cards help. I mean, obviously, I think every student would say, I'd love a Target card or a Chick-fil-A card to be able to eat and get a meal. We've got a Chick-fil-A on campus, but some of those places where they'd like to go and to shop I think is really helpful. And then periodically, I know that my wife would send some knickknack from their room, framed
Nice
pictures of the
memory.
other family members, those kinds of things. And I think each parent kind of knows what their kids need or want or would be interested in, but food is rarely not wanted, put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of food, what were some really fun Thanksgiving Day dinner discussions that first big holiday that they come home?
Yeah, well, Thanksgiving, again, I've got a big family, as you mentioned. We've got 4 kids, and then we helped raise a niece and a nephew as well. And mine were going through when both my wife's and my parents were alive. So it's a pretty big gathering and a lot of noise. And kids will talk when they want to talk, and you kind of want to ask those setup questions when you can, and just to kind of find out how it's going. And I think parents sort of know if it's working out or not, what's the right thing to say to the students at that time. And I think most students have fun. It's not uncommon to get homesick. I was, as my mother said, I was ready to go. She knew it. That the joke in my family's been before I'd graduated from high school, but before I'd even gone to college, that was actually in September back then. She'd taken my room over and converted it. My bed was out of the room, so I'm sleeping on a couch that you could make into a bed, and that was maybe a little bit abrupt, but
That's
I
the one
think
extreme.
that's the one extreme. Yeah, yeah. But I think parents know kind of what to do to get it to work out and to try to support their student.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a couple questions before we close out some of our slated questions on our agenda. What's the current enrollment at Flagler?
2,200. Looks like it'll be a little closer to 2,300 this fall. We don't have a desire to really get any higher than 2,500. It started out real small and then sort of grew up. This is roughly the range that we'd like to be in.
Yeah, I always say we're not looking to be a large institution, that we don't want to do a lot of things good. We'd like to do fewer things great.
Right. And if you're too small, if you're under 2,000, it's hard to have the concerts and the clubs and the kayak launches and those sorts of things. So it's kind of a sweet size, to be honest. The classes are, 15 students, give or take. And,
Mhm,
and,
mhm.
so we've seen it's a good size from a financial standpoint, and then to be able to provide the services that you really want to do, as well as pump money into keeping the buildings maintained.
Yeah. I was so bummed that we had to at the last minute cancel our session on just overall safety. We had some things come up here, and we weren't able to dive into that a little bit. But one family member is asking, about tourists and what is that like? I mean, you work in the building that is the big tourist attraction, and so how do we manage that for our students?
Yeah, we somewhat as a courtesy, we keep the building, the rotunda area open in the main building. And the campus, of course, it's on a campus of X acres. You're going to have people that walk through it. But the building is such a spectacular work of art that we believe opening the rotunda up is appropriate, that we want to help support the town. The two big reasons people come to St. Augustine are the old fort and frankly to look at Flagler College and the Ponce. But the dining hall is off limit to tourists. Obviously the rooms that are on the upper floors, the dorm rooms are off limit to tourists, and the doors have swipe keys so that they can't get in there. And then we've got security that is there really at all times. It's a really
Mhm.
good security department. And of course, we're right across the street from the police department, the campus is, and
Mhm.
we actually hire 2 St. Augustine police officers also to help with the patrolling. And so the tourists, they'll cross the streets, not at the stoplights and this kind of a thing, but they're there to enjoy that space as well. And we blocked off the spaces that are private. When the students are not in the dining hall, we do typically have 2 tours a day. I think it's about 10:30, 10 o'clock, and at 2 in the afternoon, in between the meals, because it's just such a phenomenal place. And frankly, we kind of like using it for advertising. We think it's good for them to go back to their hometowns and talk about what a spectacular place it is. But it's a good security department. St. Augustine's a safe downtown. We do not have a particular crime problem. Some of those statistics are available to research. You can actually, compare campuses on some of those data points, but not all schools measure the same way. We're supposed to measure the same way. But my daughter-in-law was a graduate of Flagler. My son met her when I think she was in her junior or senior year. He went to a different place, but it's a special place. I don't worry about it, and we've obviously got over half the students are female, and that often they're particularly sensitive to the security feels. So we are as well, and try to make sure that people do feel safe.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a tourist town, so we do have tourists that are, walking around, checking out some of the local museums that are across from campus, walking through the West Lawn area. But our security team is doing patrols. We partner with St. Augustine Police Department, so we always have a police officer that's working with us and available. A lot of the spaces, as you mentioned, are ID card access. So it's not like, anybody is just walking in and coming on up the stairs and things like that. So I don't know if
Yeah,
I
the
would
student center
Mhm.
takes a swipe key to get
The
in. The library takes the
library.
swipe key to get
Mhm.
in, and we watch it closely. And the security, they're really a great group of people. Many of them, they've retired and then come back to do this. And I mean, they've changed tires for students. They've picked them up when they, maybe have a fight with a boyfriend or girlfriend and lose a ride or something or other. We run shuttles
Mhm.
from the Sebastian House, which is one of the dormitories, one of the student housing facilities. They've unclogged toilets. They've helped restart Wi-Fi. Again, that's one of the advantages of the smaller place. We try to have just the amount of bureaucracy that we need and no more.
Yeah. So last question that we've kind of slated, and it does tie in a little bit with that safety area is, and we kind of just experienced our big first one. Thank you, Debbie. But hurricanes and hurricane prep. And so how do we alleviate fears for our families who may be seeing the national news that are in another state and we're experiencing something a lot different here?
Yeah, I had some years ago at a different place, I recruited a vice president of academic affairs from Utah State, and terrific guy, wonderful human being, and he came, but his wife was worried about hurricanes and alligators, and it kind of both of them surprised me because I've lived in Florida for a long, long time. Um, Alligators, in fact, I got trying to think today when the last time I'd actually seen an alligator out in the wild
They're not
was the
just
best.
walking across the street like you
Yeah,
sometimes
they're
see on social
Yeah,
media.
yeah. If you've got a lake or something, maybe you'd end up seeing them. But you're right; they're not in my yard, that's for sure. And one of the most interesting tourist places in St. Augustine is the Alligator Farm, which is just a blast to go to. I take my grandkids
Mhm,
there all the
mhm.
time, and the owner of that is a longtime board member, as was his father. But yeah, so they're not the worry. The beauty on the hurricanes, every part of the country has its own disaster. There's earthquakes, there is avalanches, there's snowstorms, there's tornadoes, there's floods. I mean, all of them are kind of miserable. The one thing on a hurricane is that the predictions and the maps are just so far advanced. So we're able to say, go south, stay put, go north, go west. And they've gotten even better this particular year with how that mapping goes. And Northeast Florida has only had one hurricane hit it, Hurricane Dora, back in 1964, St. Augustine and Jacksonville, and so kind of the geography. It's just this is not Galveston and it's not New Orleans, which just seems to hit those all the
Mhm,
time. But
mhm.
and you get plenty of warning. Unfortunately, with the tornado, there's not much of a warning, and they do real erratic tracks. Hurricanes, it's a pretty prescribed path nearly all the time. I don't want people to not worry about them. And the same thing with an alligator, or if you're out west, a rattlesnake or a cougar or something like this. You've always got to be cognizant of your outside. But my kids, but three of our kids and our niece and nephew and all of their kids live in Florida, Northeast Florida, and we pay attention to them, but it's not something to deter anybody from coming here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing them usually a week out. is when like we start to hear the rumblings of, something might be coming. So start to prepare, and we're making decisions, at least 48 hours out as an institution on what we're going to do with classes. We're very cognizant of students who have, chosen to travel to go home. And so our academic team is really working with students, especially since COVID taught us that we could do some virtual work, a little bit easily. Our incoming residential students, as well as some of our returning residential students, I believe, they all received an email yesterday from our Residence Life team on talking about their hurricane plan. And so what does that look like? If the storm is coming at us from one side, can they head south, like you mentioned, or do they need a flight home? Do they, head inland a couple miles? Like I'm 30 minutes from the institution and I'm not in an evacuation zone, but 10 minutes away from me is in an evacuation zone. So I think there's different options, but having that conversation now is gonna be good.
Yeah, and every hurricane path's a little bit different, and so again, we've been down that road before.
Mhm. We've
We are
learned a lot.
yes, and COVID actually was before I started, but the college was able to pivot to temporarily we could do these classes online. Online can be a tool. Again, we think the small class face to face is the better way to
That's what we
learn.
want. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but on a temporary basis, that's been able to work, and we've been able to help every student if they needed to evacuate. We had two storms that were not necessarily coming near us, but we had a lot of rain in St. Augustine. I think it was 2 years ago, and it
Mm.
turned into a couple big pizza parties in the dorms. There was not a need to evacuate, and we got a couple pizza places that delivered a lot of pizza really, really quick, and power comes back quick, and or did in those cases. You never really know, but we get through it. Another one, I think we told people to evacuate. We helped them move out, move to friends inland, and this sort of a thing. And
Yeah.
but we'll get through them. We'll get
We
through them.
will, yes. And thank you. This is Mr. Novak who's joined us. Flagler had his son his freshman year, and Flagler handled it very well. We got him home in plenty of time. So thank you so much. We didn't even prep that one. That was just an audience member saying thank you. So we appreciate that. Another question coming in from Mr. Carney. Can you speak a little bit to our four-year graduation rate and maybe what we're doing to help move that needle a little bit more?
Yeah, there's a couple metrics that you take a look at, and graduation rates is one of them. The typical measure actually is a 6-year graduation rate. Students sometimes are shying away if the family doesn't have money. They don't want to borrow too much money, so they're taking longer to graduate. So we actually look at the 4 and the 6-year rates, and ours is above average. If you go to a flagship school, which are kind of the old public state university, or maybe some of the privates that are there, they'll end up higher. A lot of them just have different reasons for that. Typically, it's historic. So ours is all of those kind of metrics are moving really, really very well for us. One of the things on that tell students is talk to advising. Let's make sure we got a roadmap for you to get through. In a modest amount of student loans, there's nothing wrong with. If you work 10 hours a week, maybe work in the summer, you can get through with not much in the way of student loans. The marker is don't borrow more than your first year's salary. If you're going to be a teacher now in Florida, I think that's almost $50,000. Don't borrow over $50,000. Spread out over time. That's not an insurmountable amount of money to borrow. And there's a lot of forgiveness programs that are working out there too. If you teach after X years, those can be forgiven. So each one's a little bit unique, but yeah, the metrics we look at, we're looking and they're moving in the right area. We try to put a lot of student support in, a lot of the academic support in to allow students to kind of get through into their majors. What'll happen is if students change majors, which is I changed 3 or 4 times going through.
I think I changed 3 or 4 times in the first month.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. When you do that, obviously some of those prerequisites, if you're going pre-med, don't necessarily work if you want to be a history major or a teacher or an archaeologist. So that we try to help people find out about those majors before they get into them to make sure that's really where they want to go.
Well, and I think something that I've seen grown at Flagler is the experiential learning opportunities. So students are able to really get into undergraduate research or internships or clubs and organizations where they get to see and experience things. We have a lot of majors that are those doing majors where, a hospitality tourism major is actually working in events so you can see if it's something that you're wanting to do early on, and then really go gung ho so that you're on track as you're talking more with your faculty members and advisors.
Yeah, that practical, you're exactly right. And the internships, the clerkships, the being able to be introduced to it, the community-based learning as part of these degrees are actually out there kind of seeing the real world aspect of it. Um, we have a lot of good employers in the St. Johns County and Northeast Florida area where Jacksonville is to be able to get those placements out there. And that real world stuff I think is really, really helpful. People can get to say, hey, that's what I really want to do. We don't have a nursing program, but it's amazing the number of students that say they want to go into nursing that don't like blood and don't want to touch another human being, which is pretty basic to nursing. And you're going to see blood, and you're going to have to lift somebody out of a bed or give them a shot in an arm. So it's our job to make sure that students understand what these majors entail, what the job prospects are, and what happens to be next. You mentioned, for example, we've got a 3D printer and some equipment like that. When you go to a big university, the grad students often have tough time getting to that kind of equipment. That's another one of the beauties of a small place is this is for the undergraduates to get to. And we want to help set their paths up for whatever they want to do longer term.
Yeah, yeah. One quick question, and I'm not too sure if we'll know this, but do we have generators for any of our buildings if we do lose power?
I ought to know that off the top of my head, and I don't. I think we do for one or two. We do for the IT system that we've got to have that. It's got to be cooled and that kind of a thing. But that caught me off guard. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not too sure, but I know that like when buildings have lost power, like they've worked very quickly. Like our facilities team is really on top of things. And so I'm not aware of any time at Flagler in my 15 years where a building has been, offline for a very long time because we've lost power for an extended period.
Often the reason that we lose power is a tree falls on a power line. And so most of St. Augustine, those power lines are underground. And so you don't have that particular reason for the flaw. But for next time, we'll have to get that answer.
I was going to say, yeah, you gave me some homework, so I'm going to make sure that I answer that question. But I'm not seeing any other Q&As come in. Important date. So your student did receive that hurricane prep evacuation plan email. If they are moving in, that's our other big important date is August 23rd. That's our move-in day for our incoming students. They will need to have that plan in place in order to get their key. And so we've got less than 20 days until then, I realized today. And so making sure that they check that email, they complete that form, that'll help make that move-in day a whole lot more smooth. And then we have been getting quite a few questions about move-in day. Last week's virtual session was on just the ins and outs of move-in day. Mr. Delaney and I were talking real quick. I said we had 85 questions from our family members on what to expect last week for that session. So make sure you check out that recording if you're wanting to know a little bit more about how that day is gonna run. But any last tidbits before we close out tonight that you'd like to share?
Why don't you and just follow up, mention the one stop, but we're trying to roll this year to make that.
Absolutely.
Move-in can feel like a zoo, but we've got kind of a new approach to it. Yeah.
But it's a wonderful zoo where we've got all of our little animal pens in their own little space. But we sent out, I believe it was last week, students received an email specific to them on their room assignment in their hall, but then also what time slot they've been assigned to. And so we're inviting students and families, check out that email and you'll arrive on campus during your allotted time slot. Students and families will arrive to the student center. This is our one-stop shop. We were hearing some really great feedback from our family members that they were having to go kind of all over the place on move-in day. And it was impairing their ability to just like connect with one another, but feel confident about the move-in. And so we wanted everybody to start in one spot. We will have key pickup, parking decals. We'll have our student accounts team, financial aid team, health and wellness, as well as our Center for Advising and Core Experience, all in the Student Center in this one-stop shop. There is going to be a little time in there where we're going to have our students go into one location, pick up that key on their own, do some things on their own, but family members, don't worry. We're going to have a family lounge for you where I am fairly certain there's going to be some snacks in there, which any time of day, snacks are going to go over really well. But then you'll be able to come back together. We just got the signage delivered today, and so it looks beautiful. We will have signs everywhere, all along the street, letting you know where to park, all along the street, letting you know which way to drive to get to the residence hall, and then at the different residence hall parking lots. We're going to have a bunch of volunteers all in our welcome home t-shirts, so you'll know where to go. We'll have some volunteers that are helping our family members move their belongings from their car up to their residence hall. So that's another thing to chat about this summer is what you're packing, because anything that you pack has to get from the car up into the room. And so typically on move-in days when you realize how much you packed. But we will have some Target runs the following day for our students who may want to do a little bit of extra shopping or didn't bring stuff. So they'll be able to check those out. But that's really our one-stop shop. We are going to be asking family members and directing you all where to park for that, where to park for your residence hall, and then where to park for the rest of the day so that we can keep it rolling with lots of students coming in throughout the day. But it is my absolute favorite day of the year. It is my favorite event. Any year, it is always the hottest day of the year, no matter the year. And so we've got water stations set up, but just know that we are all a hot, excited, emotional, sweaty mess for everybody on that day. But I love feeling the energy of move-in day. There's a whole lot, to start and kick it off.
We probably should just meet. You mentioned parking. When I first became a university president, a friend gave me a book that was by the former president of, I think it was South Carolina and Alabama. And it was basically a collection of chapters with his sort of tips or speeches. And one of them was like a top 10 list for new presidents. And the first one was, do not delude yourself into thinking you can solve the campus parking problem. So, and when you're in kind of a downtown area, et cetera, we do have plenty of parking. You may have to walk just a little bit, and we've got a big parking garage. And so
Yeah.
people will be moved around to try to get it to go. The first week's always a little bit tougher. After that, it settles out and really kind of works out. But we've got enough parking for a lot more students on the campus, so that part will go. I saw a question pop up about Parents Weekend, Tara.
Yeah. And so family weekend will begin on Friday, September 27th, I believe is that Friday. It's right after Founders Day on Thursday, the 26th. We typically begin with a welcome reception on that Friday. I think it's around 5 p.m. There's events that run that night. Family bingo is one of my favorites that happens, I believe, on that Friday or Saturday night. We fill up the room. But I'm also a big bingo fan, so I'm a little bit biased on that one. But then lots of different events, including the kayak launch, if we've got families that want to go out there, different tours, coffee tours, boat tours. I know they're finalizing the schedule, but it looks like that Friday, the 27th is when things are going to begin around 5 p.m. Somewhere around there for that welcome reception. And then the most popular event is actually the brunch that takes place on that Sunday, where we open up the dining hall. And so that's where our family members can come for that. But I know at move-in day, we should have some brochures for our family members that'll have a little bit more updates. And then I'll make a note. Another homework item for myself is to maybe look at the website and see if we've got some information that we can put up there.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of communication on it, but I know that
Yes,
the parent
no.
that inquired maybe coming from out of state and wants to line up the
Yeah,
travel.
yeah. No, that's great because I also just confirmed today our holiday shuttles. And so we'll be offering some holiday shuttles for the Thanksgiving break as well as the winter break. I know that was something that our family members had been asking for a little bit sooner rather than later so that they could make those travel plans. And so
About to the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shuttles to the
And so
airport,
keep an
right?
eye out for that. Yeah. And then our last question that came in is an activities fair. We have an involvement fair that we call it on that Thursday, August 29th. That is right after classes begin. And that is where any club or organization, office, student worker opportunity, anything that a student can get involved in, they are going to line our Sevilla Street outside with all these different tables. And we will just have this one night where students can just walk up to all the different tables and sign up and find out when those club meetings are happening. And so that's a big Flagler tradition that we have, is that involvement fair. But thank you so much for joining tonight. We had some good questions, some good participation. Hopefully our family members are feeling a little bit more connected and comfortable with the institution. But if anybody does have any other questions, please feel free to email studentaffairs@flagler.edu. We'd be more than happy to kind of direct that question out. Please also ask your student to check their Flagler email. You'll hear that a whole lot, but that's where they're getting a lot of that information and those reminders as we're gearing up for move-in day on the 23rd.
Yeah, and I respond to emails too. You can get that off on the webpage, and we'll try to make sure you're in the right place. Don't be afraid to ask, and we really thank you for honoring us with your students. And
Yes.
I can promise you they're going to get a great education in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and with faculty that really care about them. So good luck and welcome to campus.
Yes. Thank you so much. All right. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.